And just like that, it is showtime and I am back. Okay. I know you've been missing me, but guess what? I am back tonight. Okay. So, welcome to tonight's podcast with your host. That will be me, Dina. I hope you have always hit that little button to be subscribed to and the notification bell so that you always know when I go live. Okay. So, when you jump on tonight, make sure you drop down in the comments and tell me hello. It's rude to come into someone's house and don't speak, okay? So, not gonna be before you long, sound like I'm at church now. But I do have just a little something to share, right? So, as I stated earlier, tonight's podcast is we're still in the waiting period. We still are talking about the necessary process of between process, preparation, and promise, right? So we're in the waiting period where we have been for quite some time, but that's because the waiting period is a necessary part of God's plan, right? And it's just a lot that happens in that waiting period. And I feel like when you're open to the waiting period and in the pruning and the process, it makes it easier and it might even cut down your waiting time because you can go on and learn what you need to learn, right? So, with that being said, if you've been watching, we've been in a waiting period for quite some time, and we've just been journeying through this thing in different levels and different eras, right? And you already know what we are in the waiting period, right? You may be waiting on something else, but my journey is waiting and journeying through marriage, right? Preparing to be married by kingdom standards and not world standards, right? So tonight I was thinking of yesterday what we're gonna do tonight, how the Lord had me to go tonight. So I came up with the topic: what relational patterns are you healing from or have healed from? And that's something that I have been working on for the past maybe 3 years. But here's the thing: I didn't even know it was an issue for me to work on. Okay. And so, how did I come upon this issue? I came upon it because I have been attending Woman Evolve by Pastor Sarah Jakes for the past 3 years. I went to Woman Thou Loose 2022, which was the last year for Bishop Jakes before he turned it over to his daughter, right? So, as I'm going to Woman Evolve, these things started happening within myself, right? And I didn't really know what it was. I just knew that it was a journey that I was on. And the journey started because, like I said, I thought I was prepared to be married. Well, considered by the world standards, I was, have your own house, then travel, then did, all the cliche stuff that the culture tells us that we need to have and be done before we get married, right? But it wasn't necessarily prepared through the kingdom standards, godly standards, like learning patience, extending grace, and even to the point of healing. Like I didn't even know that the traumas that I had that needed to be addressed until it starts getting a little deeper, right? So let me give you my little notes. I'm gonna start off with what I have for tonight, right? It says we're gonna reflect on the family dynamics, past relationships, or attachment styles. Healing relational patterns is like untangling spiritual and emotional threads that have shaped how we connect, protect, and show up in relationship. These patterns often stem from past experiences, family dynamics, previous relationships, or even culture messages. Because y'all know the culture tell us how we're supposed to do this, that, and the other, right? And they can quietly influence our expectations, reactions, and capacity for intimacy. Hi, Angela. Thank you for checking in with us tonight. And so I just unloaded all that, right? So we're going to unpack that. So I'm going to start off line by line for you. Healing relational patterns is like untangling spiritual and emotional threads that have shaped how we connect. Hmm, that's a lot just in that, right? So 2022 No, 2023, I went to Woman Evolve. And after Woman Evolve, every year we have a little pajama powwow, talking about what we got from the experience, about life, just like whatever the Lord leads us. And it's like a long pajama party. So we meet up in the lobby, we discuss. It's normally about between 6 to 8 of us, right? So this particular year, 2023, we met this young lady. She was sitting in the lobby with us. I'm already telling y'all my business. I ain't been on her 10 minutes, but that's okay because it's God business, okay? So we met the young lady and she was just talking to us or whatever. We didn't know the young lady at all, right? So she told me, she said, if you have a conversation or forgive your mom, no, she said, if you have a conversation with your mom about what you've been holding, it will speed up your season of marriage. Now, y'all know, I was like, what? I knew what she was talking about, but I didn't let her know that I knew what she was talking about, and I didn't share it with anybody else, right? So I got back to Memphis. I went to work that day, and as soon as I got out of work, I went straight to my parents' house. And when I pulled up in the yard, my mom, she was like, "You came to see me?" I was like, "Yeah," because she was outside walking or something. I said, "Yeah." She said, "The Holy Ghost told me you was coming to see me." I said, "Oh, okay." So we had to sit down for almost the first time as adults, me, her, and my dad, and have conversations. One of the things that I guess needed healing from, that played a very important role in my life that I didn't know, was the dynamics that I seen in my family, in my house with my mom and my dad. So my mom was always a housewife. So she took care of us, the house, and whatever. And my dad was always the provider, the entrepreneur. He had multiple jobs, whatever. So a lot of the times, um, my mama would get her, whatever he give her as for her money wise. And my mama can shop, baby. We can spend some money. I get that from her, right? So my daddy would always say, "Woo, Lord, you spend a lot of money, and didn't I give you this?" and things like that. And to me, it sounded like he was complaining about giving her money, right? So what I should have seen as him being a provider and taking care of the home, for whatever reason, I flipped it. And I know the reason, a lot of the reason is because society tell us to do something else. And then because it wasn't a lot of people that I've seen growing up that had the mother and father in the house. And, the mom didn't work and the dad did. So what I took it upon, and for years I was mad because I felt like she was having to ask him for money, even though that's her husband. That's his job, is to provide for the house. I didn't take it like that. And I always felt like if she had her own money, she wouldn't have to ask and she wouldn't have to hear him say that. And it just would make her life easier. I was like, oh my God, I'm never depending on a man for nothing. Yeah, I said it. I said it. I was wrong, but that's how I thought, because society teaches us to have our own money. You don't go out with a man unless you got money. Make sure you got your own this, you got your own that. And so it built a complex in me that I didn't want to deal with any man, go out with anybody if I didn't have the money that I needed to, for whatever reason, if the date went wrong or whatever. And so we sat down and we had a conversation. And my dad told me how I might say that, I might complain out loud, but guess what? We agreed to her staying home, to being a stay-at-home mom. And I told her she didn't have to work. So she didn't work. He said, I told her I was going to take care of the bills. Now, I might complain or say something, but I was just talking. I still did it. And he did for years. But all of those years, for me growing up even to now, it affected me in a reverse way that I didn't even know until I went on this journey, right? And so it taught me that I didn't want to ever to depend on anybody, man or woman. If I needed to work 2, 3 jobs. That's what I was going to do because I didn't want to have to ask anybody for anything. However, that showed up in my adult life, and I didn't understand why until that young lady told me that. And when she told me that, I had to come back and I had to make it right. And that began a whole nother process because I had actually been going out with the guy at that time. And we went out a couple of times, but I really didn't want to go out with him because I didn't have any extra money. So in my mind, I could hear, don't go nowhere if you ain't got no money. Make sure you got this money in your pocket, make sure all this, that, and the other. And so I was cool with not going out with them because I didn't have any extra money and I didn't want to be put in that position because the world tells us, make sure you got your own, make sure you're independent. And that's not what God told us. And that's not even the picture of a healthy relationship, right? So once we had that conversation, and but you know what? I didn't even understand that until me and the guy went out and I had those feelings of not wanting to go out because I didn't have any money. And then when I had the conversation with my parents, I was like, oh my God, that is my why. We talked about the things that you don't want to do, but you don't know why. You have to find your why. That was my why. I didn't want to go out with him or nobody else because I didn't have my independence to how I can be able to stand on my own. So I just didn't want to deal with it, period. Once I had that conversation with my parents, it gave me a whole different perspective of why I was like that. And I told y'all in the beginning that, the Lord told me that I was too independent, too self reliant, and I had to release control. So a part of all of that is that's where that came from because I was in the mode of having to control everything myself and make sure it went this way no matter what. And I was going to hold it on my own. And I didn't even know that there was an issue until all that came up. And so I guess I said all that to say is you have to, well, you don't have to, but it's in your best interest. If you do the work, if you allow God to show you the areas that you need work on before he puts you with this spouse, because I feel like doing this journey that he has given me so much time to reflect on the things that needed fixing and needed healing within myself before he puts me with the person. So just like I said, he's working on you, he's working on that other person too, to clean up some things, to fix some things, to get your heart posture in a way that you are able to have a healthy and functional relationship and marriage. Because when you get together, it's going to be beautiful. But we are still doing the work now to get to that point. I thank God that, he showed me those areas and I didn't rebel against it and not want to say, nah, that ain't me. I was open to the process. I was open to the healing because I wanted to be healed in every area that still was an issue for me. And that was one of my major issues that I have worked through. And I have relaxed it a little bit. Well, a whole lot of it because, that's not who I am anymore. As it says, I've been evolving. And so even with the Woman Evolve conference, like every year is something different. And I'm just amazed at the growth in myself because I was open to the process. And I don't know, I just feel so, I don't know how to explain it. I guess I'm still on a high from, this week's conference or whatever, but what? I don't know. That's all, I don't know. So the other thing I had was one of the tips that he gave was about healing relational patterns was avoidance or emotional withdrawal, and that is rooted in fear of vulnerability, past rejections, or lack of emotional modeling. I can see that. I can see that fear of vulnerability. That was another thing that I had to learn well, I ain't gonna say I had to, that I learned at Woman Evolve was being vulnerable. You know how even like we don't like rejection, definitely don't like rejection from a man. And then especially when you're in those stages where you don't kind of know, so you're used to being so tough and holding your feelings in because I don't know if I want to let these feelings out because I don't know how you're going to use that. I don't know if I tell you I like you, you might say you don't like me, or whatever the case may be. So being vulnerable was another big thing for me because I didn't know how this was going to work. So I remember one year in Woman Evolved, they talked about being vulnerable and letting your guards down. And like whatever you feel, just put it out there and be okay with whatever the outcome is. And that did something to me because I was in a situation where I wanted to reach out to somebody, but I didn't really know how it was going to go. The old Dina would have been like, nah, I ain't studying it. I ain't finna do all this. It is what it is. But the new Dina was like, you know what? I was thinking about this person. So I'm going to go ahead and text them, let them know, hey, I was just thinking about you. No extra to it because that was on my heart and that was on my mind. And whatever you do with it, that's fine. I just want to express myself and to let you know that that is big for me because I'm used to being, y'all don't know, but I used to be a thug back in my days. Okay. So I'm used to being that girl that I'm strong, I ain't finna let you just, come on to me like that. I'm finna take my stance. I ain't finna be vulnerable with you. I'm finna just be my thugging doing it. And that's what it was. But that taught me to let my guards down to, hey, if you're thinking about somebody, send them a text. Of course it's a man. Now, I ain't gonna send up, other people we don't really have a problem with, but the opposite sex, for me, it was a problem because I don't know how you're gonna react from it. I don't want to be rejected or whatever it is. But guess what? Vulnerability is a good thing because you have emotions, you have feelings, and it's not always good just to hold them in the inside, right? Because when you hold it in the inside, then your mind start playing these type of games, right? And we come up with our own scenarios in our mind. I don't know about y'all, but my mind had put together a whole lot of stuff that, like, where did you even get that from? But that's what it was. So, but that taught me to be vulnerable. If you're thinking about somebody, text them, let you know. It's all good. It doesn't matter what they say, good or bad. You did what was on your heart. When they always say when somebody's on your mind, more than just a moment, send them a message, call them. It might be the Lord putting them on your heart for a reason, right? So take heed to that. You put somebody on your heart and your mind a couple of times, they may reach out to them, pray for them, do something for them, okay? And so, what does when it says rooted in fear or vulnerability, past rejections, lack of emotional modeling? So, what does healing look like from that? Healing looks like learning to stay present in discomfort. And that's what I did. I was present, even though I was so uncomfortable reaching out to somebody. But I know the Lord put it on my heart for me to do it. I was uncomfortable because I didn't know how I was going to go. But guess what? I did it. And so I was okay. So I was present in the moment and not worried about the future or the outcome or any of it, right? Then it also says practicing emotional expression in safe places, building trust through consistency, honesty, and communication. That is our biggest thing is communication, no matter who is with, especially when you in a relationship and God sends you that kingdom spouse, right? All this stuff right here that I just talked about, the healing and stuff, you got to be in a place and a point where you can have that communication with that person. Because it's especially when it's going to be a spouse, even if you're in the friendship or the talking stages, like communication is so important. So important. And that's all I got for you. Those are my relational patterns that I have healed from and continue to heal from. I'm continuing to just go with the flow, be present, emotional in the moment, and not worry about everything else. Because that's when we start getting messing up now, when we start thinking about everything else. So if you have not thought about it, think about it. Reflect on some of your family dynamics, your past relationships, or your why you have attachment issues. Write it down. Sit down and take some time, talk to the Lord, write it down, whatever you think it may be. or sit quietly and ask God to show you what it is, because sometimes we have some hidden issues that we don't know why they're there, but they are there and they are there for a reason. But if you sit down and take this journey with me, as you journey yourself, God will show us what to do and how to do it, right? So we are on the journey to becoming a better us while in the waiting period. Because listen, y'all, we are preparing because it's getting closer and closer, right? So close. Welcome to your month and season of new beginnings. Okay, that's all I got for you. I hope that I have shared something with you that encourages you to keep it moving, to keep healing, to keep journeying, to keep pushing while in the waiting period, knowing that it will be worth the wait. Okay, so until next time, I will see y'all all later.